direct tax refresher course at Birla Matusri every year. So every year we get an opportunity to hear him, and we always love to hear him. So today he is going to guide us on recent issues in direct tax. But before inviting Ved Jain sir, once again I request Jayesh Kala sir, if he can able to speak, to kindly introduce today's faculty. Jayesh bhai.
Thank you. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Uh, Thank you.
जय
It's
सर
my
आपका
privilege.
लैपटॉप जय सर आपका लैपटॉप का स्पीकर बंद कर दीजिए और जैसा है वो चालू रखिए। लैपटॉप का स्पीकर बंद कर दीजिए।
Hello.
इको है सर, इको है।
सर लैपटॉप का स्पीकर बंद कर दीजिए आपका। बोलिए।
It's my privilege to introduce.
Girish bhai, you have logged in from two places on the same. You have to close
सर
one.
लैपटॉप का माइक भी बंद कर दीजिए, लैपटॉप का माइक भी बंद कर दीजिए, लैपटॉप का
Noise
स्पीकर भी
comes up
बंद कर
because you have logged in from two sources.
दीजिए। बोलिए सर। अभी म्यूट पे हो। हाँ सर बोलिए। सर बोलिए अभी। जय सर बोलिए। नहीं।
Okay, I will introduce CA Ved Jain. We all know that he won't require any introduction, but it will be my privilege to introduce him. CA Ved Jain is practicing chartered accountant in New Delhi and has been a man of prudence, veracity, and intelligence, not now, since birth. Academically brilliant, he is a rank holder in both CA Inter and CA Final, a triple bachelor degree holder. He has completed his Bachelor of Science from Punjab University in 1973, the year in which I am born. He has completed his graduation. He completed a true follower of continuous professional education. After completing his chartered accountancy in 1976, for love on the subject, he did his Bachelor of Arts in Economics in 1979. And he also completed his Bachelor of Law in 1980. He is a fellow member of ICI for more than 4 decades. He has elected to the post of president of ICI on 5th February 2008. During his tenure as president, the ICI has earned various credentials which embark a new era of professional development. His integrity, zeal, and commitment toward the profession and society has been recognized and appreciated by the government of India. The Satyam episode happened during his tenure of the president. The ICI, he was instrumental in handling the biggest ever fraud in corporate sector and working out the plan for revival of the Satyam and to associate company closely with government of India. This was the first experiment in India of successfully implementing resolution plan of a corporate and of ensuring continuation of business and saving job of thousands of employees. This is also ensured saving of thousands of crores of bank which have lent money and execution of infrastructure project of national importance, and also ensure homes, flats for more than 900 families which have invented their lifelong saving of acquisition of home. He has been on the board of International Federation of Accountants, that is IFAC, during the year 2008 to 2011, a global organization of accountancy profession comprising of 167 members and associates in 127 countries. On Corporate Forum, he has been founder, board member of Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, set up by Ministry of Corporate Affairs. He has been chairman of National Council of Direct Taxes of SOCHM 2014 to 2016, and also its vice president in 2016-17. He has been on the board of National Aluminium Company, NALCO, in the year 2011 to 2014, and PTC India Limited 2010 to 16, PTC Financial Services Limited 2011 to 17. Presently, he is independent director on board of DLF Limited, Inventia Healthcare Limited, and also chairman MCX Clearing Corporation Limited. He is a life member of Indian Council of Arbitration. He has more than 4 decades of experience on advising corporate on finance and taxation matters. He specializes in direct taxes and has handled complicated tax matter appeal and tax planning of big corporates. A prolific writer having command in Hindi, English, French, Urdu, and Punjabi, has authored many books on direct taxes and regularly contributes direct articles in various journal, newspaper, and regular participants in various television debates on tax, finance, and economic issues. With this brief introduction, I request all the participants to welcome our beloved CA Ved Jain with loud applause. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Manish. It was not a brief, it was a very elaborate introduction. Manish Gadiaji, the Regional Council member, Mr. Jayesh Kala, I'm sure we could not hear him because of some technical issues. Office bearer of the Western India Regional Councils, all my dear professional colleagues, brothers and sisters, it's privilege for me for being participant in this program of 35th, I believe, the regional conference being organized by the Western India Regional Councils. I believe we have 5 regional councils, and every year every council, regional council organizes a regional conference where all branches and every member participate. And this year 2020 being an unprecedented year because of this coronavirus crisis, we are not able to meet physically, so we have been deprived opportunity to be amongst with you in physically. But thanks to this new mode of communication, the virtual meeting and virtual conference, we are able to, I think, interact. And when we meet physically, the interaction is limited to the people who physically come, but in virtual meeting, it goes beyond. So every person from anywhere part of the world can join this meeting. So there are some advantages and some disadvantages of this virtual mode of a meeting. I must compliment the office bearers, all the office bearers of Western India Regional Councils, and all the members, Mr. Manish, and Manish has been in touch with me. And my thanks to also my colleague in the council, Mr. Sanjeev Maheshwari, who called me up to be part of this conference and to address on the issue of the recent issues in direct taxes. That's a part, I believe. Before I come to the topic, let me react. When I joined at about 6:30, there was a discussion going on amongst the young chartered accountant about the career and what they should do and what they were doing. And one of the reaction, I think probably Mr. Sanjay Agarwal pointed out, the institute has been restricting the pass percentage, etc. Let me clarify, all my colleagues who are here, all my professional brothers who are here and watching this program, that institute has no such agenda. I have been associated for the institute for almost more than 3 decades. My interaction with the institute started way back in 1985, and I have been privy to work with all vice president, president, and never has in the history of the institute any student has been blocked if he deserved to be passed. So there is no criteria to pass a number of a particular percentage of student. Of course, the criteria is stringent, that person who fulfills the 40% and 50% criteria for each subject and 50% aggregate, that's quite a reasonably high standard for a professional. But that is the criteria, and there's no other criteria for a number of students to pass or through. All depend upon the quality of the student and the number of students who are appearing. Over the period, the number of students are increasing. That's why the number of students getting pass are increasing. That's the thing. Now, friends, coming to the issue of the direct taxes. As we all know, taxes are always a challenge. There is a dig-dong battle always between the tax administrator and tax collectors. And this battle continues, and that's why there are always issues. What can be done, what should be done, and how should be done. And there have been many controversies going on around what issues coming up or how to handle it. Today, I am here on 26th of December, and the hot topic today, I believe, with all of you will be the Vivad Se Vishwas scheme, which is going, and I think declaration can be filed up to 31st December. In my deliberation today, looking to the time of about 45 minutes, I will try to touch up 3-4 major controversial issues which are there. I will just try to come up with Vivad Se Vishwas, then non-resident some issues, then a few judgment which have been subject matter of controversy, and then few amendment regarding TCS, etc. Time permitting. So first, I will touch up for a few minutes on this Vivad Se Vishwas. As we all know that this scheme was announced in February 2020 in order to get rid of the litigation, the pending litigation, and the cutoff date was frozen at 31st January 2020. So wherever there was a dispute on record as on 31st January 2020, and that dispute has not reached a dead end, meaning thereby the dispute was alive. So there was an appeal or something like pending, only all those cases have been subject matter of Vivad Se Vishwas. I believe now down the line, after 8-9 months, we all are aware of the nitty-gritty of the scheme. I would like to touch only 2-3 issues which may be of interest to you and which may need to be taken care of. We all believe when Vivad Se Vishwas scheme like this, there will be a payment out, then only the issue can be settled. I may just bring to your notice, if you have not already noticed, that this scheme is a unique scheme where a dispute can be settled even without making any payment. There can be a situation like this, and this gives an opportunity for the person to look into, and particularly professional, to examine how to handle those issues. I have come across in the last few months many cases where the dispute is going on unduly without there being any disadvantage to the client or to the assessee in case he want to put an end. One of the scheme says, in case there is a loss and that loss has been reduced because of the various additions made thereon, and there is no demand outstanding for that year under consideration on the assessed income which is in dispute, that it permits to settle that dispute without payment of taxes, provided that loss which has been carried forward has not been adjusted in subsequent years. If, for an example, if we say in 2005-06, an assessee has filed a return declaring an income of say 1 crore 20 lakh rupees as a loss. Assessing officer has made an addition of say 90 lakh rupees, whereby the loss has been reduced to 30 lakh rupees. Now a dispute is on that 90 lakh rupees. There can be a situation where this loss of 90 lakh rupees which has been disallowed may not have been adjusted in subsequent years. If that be the case, it will be an ideal situation. Why to continue to fight it out? Why not to settle it out and to get out of this trouble? Because in any case, that loss has expired later on. In case you have won an appeal with CIT appeal, the matter is pending in tribunal, then the loss will be 50%, then is only 45 lakh rupees have to be adjusted. Then there is another possibility that this loss may have been set off in the subsequent year. If that be the case, it will be ideal that the payment of taxes is made in this year rather than in the subsequent year. And you will ask why so? Because if you settle the liability in this year of 90 lakh disallowed, you will be required to pay tax on this 90 lakh rupees or only at the rate of 30 or 35%, whatever may be the case. But you will not be required to pay any interest or penalty, etc. But in case you do want that this loss should not be disturbed, and you should be that this loss should be carried forward as it is, and it should not be carried forward, and here you don't want to pay taxes, then in subsequent year where you have adjusted the loss, in that year the demand will get created, and since that year is not in dispute and that year is not going into Vivad Se Vishwas, then probably interest and other consequences will follow. So we as a professional need to take care of this situation. Same is the case with the MAT. There are many cases where the book profit MAT is being carried forward. But in case the dispute is on a regular income, and by increase in the regular income consequent to the settlement, the liability under MAT still continues to be higher than the regular income, there is no need to continue with the litigation, because there will be no tax liability at all, because you were earlier required to pay tax on MAT and you will still be required to pay tax on MAT. Only thing will be the MAT credit will get reduced to that extent. So there is a possibility that that MAT credit may get reduced on that. And when MAT credit get reduced, I have come across many instances where huge MAT credit is lying with no utilization. There's no need to continue with the MAT credit. And more so when under the amended provision with the new scheme has been introduced under section B115BAA, in case one opts for that scheme, there will be no tax liability, there will be no MAT liability, and the tax rate get reduced to 22%. We are supposed to file the return by 31st of January in case of audited account, because in all company cases it will be 31st January. We need to be cautious that whether a company will like to opt for a new scheme where the tax rate get reduced to 22% and MAT get abolished. And when MAT get abolished, the MAT credit get also abolished. Many people believe, no, why I should surrender MAT and I should claim credit. Before taking credit or continuing with the old scheme, my suggestion will be, please examine this issue, that the new tax rate is 22% as against 30%, the old rate. And under the new rate, there is no MAT. Now, in case you have a MAT credit, you will get a benefit of 22 minus 15, which is the new MAT rate. Meaning thereby, if you are liable for book profit, then you are liable to pay tax at 15%. If you are pay regular tax liability, which will be 22%. So that real advantage is 7%, but sometimes we calculate the regular tax at 30% and MAT tax at 15%. So there is a advantage of 15%. I am of the view that 30 minus 22, 8% is otherwise available to you if you opt for a new scheme. So except those companies which are availing incentives, maybe some income which is exempt under section 80IA, 80IB, many of these have come to a sunset clause, or many of those companies which are having carry forward losses because of these claims, something like 35AB, etc., research development expenditure. All such companies to opt for a new scheme, because it is a win-win situation. Please examine your viability and profitability for the next 3 to 5 years, whether the advantage which you are looking forward you will be able to achieve or not. In case you are not, please do not continue with the old scheme. Switch over to the new scheme. That's the advantage. Now coming back to the Vivad Se Vishwas, these I believe brought forward losses and MAT are the two issues which we need to examine. In other cases, my suggestion will be, wherever there is apparently looks to be any advantage assessee, the assessee should try to put an end to the litigation, as I am of the view that this scheme is one of the best schemes which the government has announced and come forward. Only challenge is the cutoff date is 31st January 2020. There are 2-3 riders which the government has not accepted. One, to tag along that in case there is a dispute in 1 year and similar dispute is likely to come in the subsequent year, this scheme does not permit that. I'm still hopeful that one day, maybe after this scheme is 31st December, in case this scheme get extended, some concession may be coming on that part also. Second part is where an income get assessed in one particular year, and the advantage of that scheme, you have already declared that income in subsequent year, or where an expenditure getting disallowed like 43B in 1 year, and the advantage of taking benefit of deduction of the same in the next year, those issues have not been clarified. And now the problem is in those cases, the assessee is not able to take the benefit scheme. So these are some of the issues which are still pending on the Vivad Se Vishwas. But as I said, this is a good scheme. And even in loss cases where additions have been made, where carry forward losses have not been availed, where MAT credit has not been availed, it will be in the interest of the assessee to settle this dispute and get out of it. I'm not going into the other nitty-gritties. There's one more controversy which has come up with the latest circular which has been issued, I think, a fortnight back, whereby it has been said, even where the assessment has been reopened or where the assessment has been opened on consequent to a search, etc., those cases will get also covered. Frankly speaking, when I read the Vivad Se Vishwas Act, this 125% rate is applicable in the search case. And search cases are those cases where search has been carried out on the SSC under section 132 or assessed there is a deemed search by invoking section 153C. In case one assessment has been framed and under section 148 or like this, I am frankly of the opinion that that case does not fall as a search case, because whatever may be the document found, etc., that's an information only. It is not a search. So by expanding the scope through circular, probably does not have a legal backing and it may not survive. But I'm still of the view clearly that this controversy is an unnecessary controversy, where there is an assessment under section 153A or 153C. Then in that case, the subsequent year, which is the search year, will also get 125%. But other than that, that will not be there. As regard the definition of disputed tax, disputed interest penalty, I'm not going into that nitty-gritties, because I believe there is no such controversy arising on that part. We all know what is the disputed tax interest penalty. Only thing to be kept is, in case there is a disputed tax, then interest penalty automatically goes and you need not go for interest and penalty. And in case there is a disputed tax is not in controversy, then I think disputed penalty can be taken care of just by paying 25% or 30%. So these are the broader contours of, I believe, of the Vivad Se Vishwas Act, which I believe is the recent issue. Another controversy which is going on, which will come up like anything, will be on the issue of the residential status. There are two issues which are, I think, agitating the mind of all non-resident probably. One issue is arising consequent to the amendment made by the Finance Act 2020. Another is the what we call a situation beyond control due to this corona pandemic, where the non-residents are stuck up in one country because of this situation. For the financial year 1920, the government has announced a circular giving concession that period will get excluded in the month of March, which got people stranded. But for the financial year 2021, many of the non-residents are in dilemma what to be done, which period to be excluded, because perforce with the flights were not moving out of India, more flights were not coming in India. So there are many non-residents which had got stuck up in India, and their period of stay has extended the prescribed period, which is under the act on that part. So that's a controversy which is still going on. I am still confident that the CBDT is awaiting when the regular flight will start. But I believe many people are supposed to pay advance tax. Then there is a liability on the deductor to deduct TDS, which also depend on your residential status of the deductee. It would be ideal for the CBDT to come out with a clarification and a circular how this period is going to be excluded or included for the purpose of determining the status of the residential status or non-residential status. That's another controversy which is brewing in, and I believe it should be clarified as early as possible. Now, another controversy on non-residential status is regarding the amendment which has been made by the Finance Act 2020. We all know that residential status has been defined in Section 6, and as per Section 5 of the Income Tax Act, the income chargeable to tax depend on your residential status. In the case of a resident, it is all income which is accrued or deemed to accrue, received or deemed to receive, or income which accrues or deemed to receive outside India, which become chargeable to tax in the hand of a resident. In the hands of a non-resident, it is income which accrues or arises in India, income which is received or deemed to be received in India, that becomes chargeable to tax. But the income which accrues or arises or received or deemed to outside India is not chargeable to tax in the hand of a non-resident. And the third category is resident, but not ordinary resident. In that case, income which accrues or arises outside India is not chargeable to tax, except income which arises from outside India in respect of the profession, setup, or a business which is being controlled from India. So these are the three situations. And in that direction, the Section 6 define the residential status. And as we all know, by our common understanding, a person is considered to be a resident of India if he has been in India for 182 days or more. That's a criteria which is there. And then there is a second limb also. A person having been in India for a period of, we say, more than 365 days in the preceding 4 years and has been in India for a period of 60 days or more also become a resident. So you can become a resident of India under 2 criteria. One, if you have been in India for 182 days or more, or if you have been in India for 365 days or more in the preceding 4 years, and then you have been in India for 60 days or more, you still become a resident. So these, either of the criteria you fulfill, you become a resident. But in order to encourage Indian born resident or Indian citizen to come to India more frequently, there are 2 relaxations given in the explanation below this clause of 180 or 365 days. A person, an Indian citizen or a person of Indian origin who leaves India outside India as a merchant navy or etc., or for the purpose of employment outside India, then in that year, this period of 60 days is to be considered as 182 days. So meaning thereby, if in financial year 2021, I go to say UAE or UK, etc. for employment, and though I have been in India in the preceding 4 years for 365 days, but during this period, I am less than 182 days, then I will not become a resident, I will become a non-resident. Similarly, for a person who have become non-resident in earlier year, if they come to India for visit in India or doing thing, the concession has been given to Indian citizen and person of Indian origin that they will continue to be non-resident even if they exceed period of 60 days, but they are not less than 182 days. So meaning thereby 60 period has been given to 182 days. But now the Finance Act 2020 has changed this criteria, the second criteria, meaning thereby if a person who has who's a non-resident, and if he comes to India and he stays in India for 120 days or more, he will become a resident of India subject to the condition that his income from India other than the foreign sources is 15 lakh rupees or more. So if you are having an income in India which is 15 lakh rupees or more, and you need to be in India in that year for less than 120 days, otherwise you will become a resident. I believe this is one criteria which is going to create a problem for non-resident. If I read this, the controversy, where the controversy, you will ask why I'm narrating this, which is a Finance Act 2020. By this clause, I'm discouraging all my Indian citizen and person of Indian origin. Please do not come to India. If you come to India and stay in India for 120 days or more, you will become a resident. And if you become a resident, though you will be called resident but not ordinary resident, and you will be taxed only on the income which is other than foreign source income, but your status will change to a resident but not ordinary resident, meaning thereby the benefit of the double taxation avoidance treaty, the concessional rate of tax, etc., all will go. Now, India has started taxing dividend income in the hands of a shareholder as against the company, which used to be earlier where dividend distribution tax. Now, on an Indian resident, the tax rate can be 36%, 30% plus surcharge, etc. Under various treaties, the tax rate is 5 to 15%. If you are a resident of UAE, then the tax rate is 10% under treaty. If you are a resident of Hong Kong, the tax rate is 5%. So depending on the tax rate, but under this new clause, if you are in India for 120 days more, or your income is 15 lakh and your income is more than 15 lakh rupees, you will become a resident but not resident, and this dividend income or other income will become chargeable to tax a higher rate. There are certain other concessions available to non-resident which will also go. I wonder why this amendment is required. Because what I am doing is, in order to avoid this clause, I have 2 options. One, either I curtail my visit to India less than 120 days, or if you want to be in India for 120 days more but less than 182 days, curtail my income in India, meaning thereby I reduce my investment in India. I don't make investment in India, whether it is a share, whether it is interest, whether it is a rental income or any other income, I should reduce it. This is going to be a counterproductive. Then there is another amendment which says a person who considers himself to be a resident or not resident of any country, and if he is an Indian citizen or a person of Indian origin, and his income is 15 lakh rupees or more in India, that is income other than foreign source income, he will also be deemed to be an Indian resident. Here we are changing the what we call rule of the games, India all along has been following what we call incidence of tax based on geography and based on your status, residential. Now, what we are doing is we are shifting the game goalpost. We are making it a citizen or person of Indian origin. So now all Indian passport holder, in case they are in a country where they say they are not supposed to pay tax because of the residence status, etc., and their income is more than 15 lakh rupees, they will become liable to pay tax in India because they will be deemed resident, and deemed resident again resident but not resident. And message is again loud and clear. Either you reduce the income of less than 15 lakh rupees in India, then this clause is not applicable. So all these people will continue to enjoy the benefit. The only thing they need to plan is that they need not come to India, or they need not have income from India of 15 lakh rupees or more, and you can get out of this. I believe this is going to be a major controversy in time to come, and the tax officer may raise many issues and many problems on that point. This is another area which I believe will be of interest, or maybe a controversial area on this point. Then, friend, there were another amendment which was made in the Finance Act 206 C1H, which is, I believe, tax collection at source on the goods which has been levied, and I believe this is also going to be a major challenge in tax compliances. So I'm not touching up this issue because I believe that this amendment has been made, but this will become a controversial issue in time to come up, because this is going to increase the paperwork and the load without any additional advantage about the trail which the intention is. I am of the view that the GST having been implemented and the complete trail of all purchase and sale being available under the GST regime, there was no need to bring this type of TCS. Another interesting issue will be the recent judgment by the Supreme Court in the case of PILCOM, which is known as PILCOM. You will also like to know what is the meaning of why PILCOM. Some of my colleague, my friend here are maybe cricket fans and will be aware way back in 1996, India, Pakistan and Sri Lanka have jointly hosted this one-day World Cup, one-day cricket World Cup. It was India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. And for the hosting of that, a committee was formed, which is known as Pakistan, India, Lanka Joint Committee. PILCOM, that's why it is PILCOM called, PILCOM. And this committee had a headquarter at London, but this committee had made certain payment to the various empire, various countries, etc. And on that basis, a dispute has arisen, and Calcutta TDS officer, because a bank account of this was also opened in Calcutta, PILCOM account was opened in Calcutta. He said, why you have not deducted tax at source under section 194E, which mandate any payment made to any sports persons or body, etc. At that time, the tax rate was 20%, and there was a section 115BA which mandated that this payment has to be, tax rate will be 20%. Then the various pleadings were made that it is not required, or the issue required. Though ultimately court said that no, out of the various payment, a small payment was made which was tax was required to be deducted at source. So there is no issue on that part. But the interesting aspect is that the Supreme Court in this judgment has said that where the section mandate that tax has to be deducted at particular rate, then tax is required to be deducted at that rate only, irrespective of the tax rate being lower under the DTAA treaty. So meaning thereby, in case a payment was made to a sports person or a body of, say, in UK or say like this Australia, where under DTAA such payment is liable for at the rate of 10%, but section 194E mandate 20%, then the tax should have been deducted at the rate of 20%, and the other person should have filed the return and claimed benefit of this. I believe this is going to be a cause of a major challenge on that. Because now to expect what we are expecting from this on this issue, that you plead deduct tax at a higher rate and then let the other person claim it. When I was reading out the Supreme Court judgment, and the last paragraph, a small discussion is coming on, and without going into the major challenges and major issues, and without what is going to the past history. But now this being a Supreme Court judgment, it will be applicable. So now two distinctions need to be made. Where the Income Tax Act has prescribed the rate itself, there are few sections in the Income Tax Act which have prescribed the tax rate. Now you cannot override those tax rates by the treaty. However, where the rates have been prescribed in the Finance Act, if you look at the section 192 to 195, which are the various income tax TDS provision, you will notice by and large all such provisions have three categories. One, some provisions are applicable to all persons. Some provisions are applicable to residents only. Some provisions have prescribed the tax rate. Somebody says at the rate as may be rates in force. So there are 4 or 5 categories, so confusing. When I look at 192, it is salary. It says the salary has to be deducted at the rates in force and on all persons. 194A, when we in dividend I talk, it is on dividend paid to resident only. 194A, when I talk interest, it is a interest to resident only. 194C, when I talk of a contractor, it is a payment to a contractor to resident only. But when I go to section 194E, which is sportsman, it is payable to all, and the tax rate has been prescribed therein. As in 194A, the rate is prescribed 10%. 194C, 2% or 1% is prescribed. 194A, 20% is prescribed. But there are certain provisions where the rates have not been prescribed, the rates in force only. Now, in that where the rates in force, those rates will be subject to treaty. But where the rates have been prescribed in the section itself, like 194E, etc., then treaty will get overruled and deductor will be required to deduct TDS, because deductor cannot take the benefit of the treaty. It is the deductee which can take the benefit of the treaty. And since the rate in treaty is lower than the rate prescribed in the Act, deductor will deduct at a higher rate, and it will be the deductee which will file the return and then claim it. I believe this is going to create a very difficult proposition, and it will be counterproductive for India because non-resident or all foreign company will be getting refund after getting status, and the resident will be paying higher taxes on that part. So that's another controversy which has arisen on the PILCOM. There is another interesting judgment which has come from the Delhi ITAT recently, I think 2 months back, in the case of GST, where we all know that before 31st March 20 till assessment year 2021, company is liable to pay tax which is called dividend distribution tax on its dividend, and this rate was hovering around 20%. And now an issue has arisen in the past whether this rate of 20% will override the rate provided in treaty. Now, as per this section 115Q, all companies were supposed to pay same rate of tax at 20%, whether the dividend is being paid to a resident of a US, Singapore, UK, or Germany, etc. All these shareholders were making hue and cry, or including the companies, saying that why we should pay a rate higher than the rate on dividend which company pays instead of the DT triple rate. Now, this judgment of the Delhi Tribunal has accepted the contention of the company that the tax rate applicable will be the rate under the treaty or 20%, whichever is lower. With the result, many of the companies have now started filing petition before the courts, etc., that they should be given a refund of the excess dividend distribution tax paid by them, because the rate of tax under the treaty is lower as compared to the rate they have paid, and the payment of the dividend has gone to a non-resident. I believe this is one of the controversy which is coming up, and this will be the issue. I will suggest my colleague that may look into, but I may just put a rider to it. This is a judgment from the tribunal and still to be settled by the High Court or the Supreme Court. When I'm talking of this, I may talk of another controversy which is brewing and which I believe now can settle on this issue. We all know under Section 40A, while computing profit and gains of business or profession, income tax paid or the surcharge paid, etc., is not an eligible deduction. Suppose my company income is 1 crore, tax rate is 30%, surcharge is 10%, and education is 3 or 4%, whatever it is. Now, actually, Section 40A says any tax paid is not income tax paid is not eligible for deduction, With the result, I pay on 1 crore rupees my tax, which normally people have been paying 30 lakh, then 10% surcharge, 33 lakh, and then 4% GST. Now, judgment has come up from various court, high court, I will say, various high court judgment has come up, where it has been said that cess paid is not covered under Section 48, meaning thereby while computing income under with profit and gains of business or profession. So this is another area which need to be looked in and which may be worked out on that part. Another area of, I believe, of the recent issue, of course, is the most popular judgment of Vodafone and Cairns. We all know that what was the controversy in Vodafone and Cairns. The government of India intend to tax Vodafone and Cairns in respect of the capital gain arising to the parent company, despite such parent company is a foreign company and is not holding directly shares in Indian company. We all know under Section 9(1) there is a deeming fiction income which may accrue outside India, but which is deemed to accrue in India. So there is a deeming fiction which has been created in this issue. Now, as per this section, where you are holding shares of an Indian company, any capital gain arising on their own will be chargeable to tax in India. However, in case a foreign company is holding investment in Indian company, and if shares of that company get sold, of foreign company, not an Indian company, then Indian capital gain was not chargeable to tax in that particular year. Vodafone case was exactly the same. The Vodafone parent company, which was in Cayman Island and Cyprus, that company share were sold out to an outside entity, and since that company was holding shares in Indian company, now by a deeming fiction created, this was supposed to be taxed, though the law was not there. The matter traveled to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court gave a judgment in favor of the Vodafone and said, no, the law has always been very clear on this issue, and this income is not chargeable to tax. Now, in order to overrule this Supreme Court judgment, by the Finance Act 2014, an amendment was made retrospectively, bringing into tax net or this capital gain as chargeable to tax. So that was the controversy which was going on. Now, in order to address this issue, the Vodafone has gone to international arbitration, saying under the treaty agreed between the India and UK, the investment has to be protected and they cannot be discriminated against. And now that arbitration award has been given by Singapore. Yes, this award, this tax which has been levied is in violation of the treaty, of the investment treaty entered between India and UK, and hence the government must refund this tax along with the cost. Similar judgment has come up recently last week about the Cairns, following the same principle. Now, the government of India and the Ministry of Finance has still not accepted this arbitration award, and they have challenged this award in the higher court on this in the Singapore itself, on the pretext that investment treaty will not apply to the tax issues, and this being a tax issue. So this will be another controversy which is arising on that part, and one need to look into this aspect on that, how this is going to be handled. Friend, these are some of the issues which I just wanted to take up on this aspect on that part. And subject to, I think Manish is there. If the time is available, we can continue with some of the more issue, and otherwise we can take few questions, etc. Manish, are you there?
सर आप मनीष सर आ रहे हैं, एक सेकंड में सर आ रहे हैं। मनीष सर आ गए सर। मनीष सर अनम्यूट करो सर। फोन करो उसको।
Manish, are you there? Vikas, yeah.
विकास सर का आवाज नहीं। विकास सर आपका आवाज नहीं आ रहा है।
Good evening, friends. So really it was a excellent session, enriching us, and we have with us CA Vikas Jain, our regional council member, and I request Vikas bhai to kindly propose, but before proposing vote of thanks, Mishra ji, we
No,
have
I
some
think
questions.
Mani, I had a break only on the point, and in case any question, because I'm trying to save timing, looking to a time constraint, I just looked into that aspect. So that's the idea. I thought let's have a few questions, and if they are participants who have some issues, recent issues, which we can touch upon and work out. That's why I gave an option that in case there are participants who want to have a particular issue or particular question to be debated out, that's the issue.
मिश्रा जी, अपने पास क्या क्वेश्चन आए हैं एक बार लगाओ ना स्क्रीन पे.
And you can, I think you can ask all participants in case they have any question, they can ask or they can put on chat, whatever it is.
मिश्रा जी, क्वेश्चन है क्या हमारे पास?
Vikas is not able to hear us, I believe.
विकास जी,
can
are
you
you
hear
able
us?
to hear?
Yes.
Yeah,
I
sir.
think there is one question which has come up for the purpose of residence pertaining to 128 to 182A. The amount of total income of 15 is mentioned. Does it mean taxable income or include tax-free income? I believe this is a taxable income. The reason being already says is that income, which is the total income, what has been used.